Here is the version of the story most people know. In 1953, Swanson was left with 260 tons of unsold Thanksgiving turkey sitting in refrigerated rail cars with nowhere to go. A salesman named Jerry Thomas supposedly looked at the problem, placed slices of turkey into aluminum trays with side dishes, and created the TV dinner. It sounds perfect: an accidental surplus, a clever salesman, a new product, and a marketing triumph. The first year sold thousands. The next year sold millions. It is clean, simple, and memorable. There is only one problem. It is almost certainly not the full truth. Former employees challenged the story. Swanson itself was never fully consistent about who deserved the credit. And the deeper you look, the more it becomes clear that the real inventor came earlier, worked under very different circumstances, and has largely disappeared from public memory. That man was William Maxon, a New York inventor whose contribution has been overshadowed for decades. In 1944, Maxon reportedly froze leftover cauliflower, forgot about it, and later ate it after a year in storage, only to find that it still tasted acceptable. That accidental moment led him to a larger idea. If individual foods could survive freezing and reheating, then an entire complete meal might be built around the same principle. Maxon created exactly that: a frozen meal made of one protein, two side dishes, and a partitioned tray designed to keep the components separated. He did not begin by selling it to supermarkets. He pitched it to the U.S. Navy. At a time when pilots and military personnel often had to rely on canned and uninspiring food, Maxon proposed something much more advanced. Instead of a generic ration, they could receive a hot meal with meat and vegetables served in a compact heating system he also designed. He called the meals sky plates. After the war, the same basic concept moved into civilian life. Pan American Airways began serving similar heated meals to passengers in flight, and Maxon rebranded the idea for retail use under the name Strato Plates. By the time Swanson entered the story, the concept of a partitioned, frozen meal, heated and served in a disposable tray, had already existed for years. It was not born in a rail car full of leftover turkey. It had already been flying at 30,000 feet. That is where Jerry Thomas enters the picture in a more complicated way. In 1953, he reportedly returned from a Pan American flight on which he had been served a warm meal in a disposable tray. He took the idea back to Swanson and pitched it internally. In other words, he may not have invented the frozen tray meal itself, but he did recognize its commercial potential in a powerful new context. Most importantly, he supplied the name that changed everything. He called it a TV dinner. That naming decision mattered enormously. Television ownership had exploded in post-war America. The TV had become the dominant new object in the living room, and any product linked to it immediately felt modern, convenient, and exciting. Swanson designed the packaging to resemble a television set. The meal was not just food. It was a new kind of domestic experience, one wrapped in the glamour of the screen. Around 5,000 units sold in the first year, then 10 million the next, and roughly 25 million the year after that. The idea exploded. Swanson became the name people remembered. William Maxon faded almost completely from the story, but the invention itself is only part of what makes the frozen meal fascinating. The manufacturing process reveals something even more interesting. A TV dinner is not one food cooked, frozen, and reheated. It is a system of separate foods, each manufactured on its own line, then brought together at a single assembly point. Take a classic turkey dinner as an example. The turkey begins on one production line. Whole birds are cooked in industrial ovens, cooled, mechanically deboned, and sliced into portions measured very precisely. Gravy is prepared elsewhere in large kettles, often hundreds of liters at a time, seasoned, thickened, and held at temperature until it is ready to be dispensed. The mashed potatoes run through a completely different process. Potatoes are peeled, boiled, mashed with milk and butter, and then piped into portioning systems. Vegetables such as green beans or corn may not even come from the same plant. They often arrive individually, quick frozen from another facility, already blanched and flash frozen at temperatures around -35 degrees. The dessert, whether brownie, cobbler, or another sweet element, may be baked, cut, and portioned on yet another line entirely. So before the tray is even filled, the meal already exists as 4 different foods produced at different temperatures with different textures and often on different schedules. All of them are moving toward one shared destination. That destination is the assembly line. Empty multi-compartment trays travel along a conveyor. And at each station, one part of the meal is deposited into its designated section. Turkey goes into one compartment. Gravy is added directly on top of the turkey. Mashed potatoes are piped into the next section. Vegetables fill another. Dessert lands in the final compartment. The measurements have to be extremely precise. Too much gravy and it spills into the potatoes. Too little turkey and the portion looks wrong. The acceptable margin is often only a few grams. On a large line, enough trays can be filled in a single hour to feed a small town. Once the trays are filled, they are sealed and sent into a blast freezer, operating somewhere between -30 and -40 degrees. There, the entire meal freezes solid in roughly 30 to 90 minutes. That speed matters because freezing is not only about temperature, it is about crystal size. Freeze too slowly and large ice crystals form rupture cell walls and leave vegetables mushy and meat dry when reheated. Freeze rapidly and millions of tiny crystals form instead, preserving texture far more effectively. The same physics that make flash frozen vegetables successful are applied here to an entire assembled meal all at once. Freezing, however, is only part of the story. The other major transformation in the history of the TV dinner came through packaging. In 1953, Swanson's meals were sold in aluminum trays and designed to be heated in a conventional oven for about 25 minutes. That made them convenient by the standards of the time, but they still required patience and planning. The frozen meal was easier than cooking dinner from scratch, yet it had not fully become the ultra-fast, near-frictionless product people now associate with the category. That shift arrived decades later, especially in the 1980s, when plastic microwave-safe trays changed the entire equation. By 1986, meals designed specifically for microwave heating could go from freezer to table in roughly 5 minutes instead of 25. That speed made frozen meals even more compatible with the rhythms of modern life. But it also created a new engineering problem. Microwaves do not heat food evenly. Edges can become too hot while the center stays cold. One compartment may overcook while another lags behind. If the frozen meal was going to work in a microwave, the tray itself had to become part of the cooking system. This is where susceptors entered the design. A susceptor is a thin, metallic film, often thinner than a human hair, bonded to parts of the tray or packaging. Its function is to absorb microwave energy and convert it into direct heat. That makes it possible to brown or crisp certain foods in places where ordinary microwave energy would simply warm them without texture. A brownie can develop a firmer base. A breaded chicken portion can get some searing underneath. What feels like a better cooked frozen meal is often the result of hidden material engineering rather than the microwave alone. The texture is not accidental, it is designed. Once frozen, sealed, and packaged, the finished meals are shipped and stored at about -18 degrees Celsius. Shelf life usually ranges from 12 to 18 months. That means the meal you buy in March may contain turkey cooked the previous autumn, potatoes processed months earlier, and vegetables frozen in another plant at the peak of the previous harvest season. Several months of agricultural and industrial timing are compressed into a 5-minute dinner. This compression is one reason frozen meals became so important commercially. The American frozen meal market is now worth well over $90 billion. Roughly half the country eats some kind of frozen meal at least once a week, even after prices rose sharply in recent years. What began with Maxon's wartime skyplate has expanded into thousands of products across every imaginable category. Lean cuisine for calorie-conscious buyers, Hungry Man for oversized portions, Amy's for organic and vegetarian customers, Trader Joe's for shoppers looking for novelty and global variations, ranging from Japanese bento-style frozen trays to Indian thali and Mexican enchilada meals. What is remarkable is how universal the concept has become. A system originally designed to feed Navy pilots and airline passengers now feeds households on nearly every continent. Yet the name most people remember is still TV dinner, a label tied not to the first inventor but to the marketer who understood the cultural moment best. And that cultural moment may be the most important part of the entire story. Before the rise of the TV dinner, the American family meal was generally built around a table. People sat facing one another. Dinner was not only about food, but also about ritual schedule and conversation. The television changed that, but the TV dinner made the change effortless. It was not just a meal that could be eaten while watching TV, it was a meal designed specifically for that purpose. The name itself made the intention obvious. The packaging was designed to resemble a television set. The tray fit neatly onto the collapsible TV tray tables that became common in mid-century homes. The entire product was engineered to move dinner physically and symbolically out of the kitchen and into the living room. It replaced plates with compartments, serving bowls with packaging, and shared tableware with an individual tray. Sociologists later tracked the long decline of the shared family meal across the second half of the 20th century. Television was often identified as one of the major drivers, but the TV dinner was the object that removed the practical barriers. It made eating separately while facing a screen simple enough to become routine. No serving, no carving, no plating, no table setting. No cleanup beyond throwing away a tray or washing a fork. The product did not just respond to a cultural shift, it accelerated one. What makes this especially striking is that almost no one seems to have intended that outcome directly. One version of the story begins with leftover turkey. Another begins with a forgotten frozen cauliflower and an inventive engineer. Somewhere between those moments, a product emerged that did more than feed people conveniently. It quietly changed the structure of dinner itself. That may be why the frozen meal is so culturally revealing. Most inventions begin with the question, how do we make this better? The frozen meal began with a different question. How do we make this disappear? No prep, no skill, no timing, no dishes, no table. The goal was removing labor, removing coordination, removing friction from dinner. And it succeeded so well that it removed more than anyone expected. In solving the problem of preparation, it also weakened the ritual that once gathered people together at the same time and in the same place. It did not abolish the family meal on its own, but it made it much easier to abandon. So when someone peels the film off a frozen meal today, they are not just opening a box of food. They are opening the result of multiple supply chains, multiple production lines, precise freezing physics, material engineering, and decades of social adaptation. Inside that tray is turkey cooked months earlier, potatoes processed in another season, vegetables frozen in another plant, and dessert crisped by a metallic layer too thin to see. 4 separate foods meet in one assembly point. Enter one blast freezer, go into one box, and reappear 5 minutes later as dinner. That is the modern frozen meal in its fullest sense, not simply food preserved by cold, but an industrial system built to remove as much thought, effort, and time from dinner as possible. In that sense, the frozen meal is not just a product of food engineering, it is also a product of cultural timing. William Maxon may have been the first person to build the modern concept in a recognizable form, but he introduced it in a world that was not yet fully ready to absorb what it meant. His sky plates and later Strato meals were ahead of their time. They solved a logistical and technological problem, but they arrived before television's suburban living, and the post-war transformation of domestic life had fully aligned around convenience as a value. Swanson, by contrast, entered at exactly the right moment. By the early 1950s, television had become the symbolic center of American leisure. Suburban households were growing, consumer packaging was becoming more sophisticated. Convenience was beginning to reshape expectations around domestic labor. The frozen meal no longer appeared merely as a technical novelty. It could now become part of a wider new lifestyle. That is why Jerry Thomas, whether or not he invented the tray meal itself, mattered so much. He understood how to connect a pre-existing idea to the most powerful cultural object in the home. He did not just help sell a meal, he helped sell a new way of eating. This is why the name TV dinner was so effective. It did not describe the food. It described the social setting in which the food was meant to be consumed. The tray was not simply compartmentalized for portion control or heating efficiency. It was designed to sit on your lap or on a folding tray table while your attention faced the screen. The meal was portable in a very specific domestic way. It was intended to leave the kitchen and enter the living room. That physical relocation changed the meaning of dinner. Once dinner leaves the table, it begins to lose some of the rituals that once organized family life. Serving food from shared dishes, waiting until everyone is seated, passing plates, clearing the table, and talking through the meal all depend on a fixed center. The frozen tray weakens that center. It gives each person an individual portion, a separate container, and the freedom to eat independently. Convenience becomes individualized. The meal is no longer something that gathers the household. It becomes something each person manages alone. That does not mean the TV dinner single-handedly destroyed family meals. Social changes are never that simple. Television work schedules, suburban routines, changing gender roles, and the rise of convenience culture all played important roles. But the frozen meal mattered because it translated those larger changes into a usable object. It turned social drift into habit. It made a screen-facing dinner not just possible, but easy. This is one reason the product deserves more attention than it usually receives. People often treat the frozen meal as a simple convenience food, a practical response to busy life. But in historical terms, it was also a device that helped reorganize the rhythms of the American evening. It quietly moved dinner away from preparation, away from shared timing, and away from the table itself. It fit perfectly into a new model of domestic life in which the goal was not only to eat, but to avoid friction. No chopping, no planning, no serving, no waiting, no dishes, no conversation required. That logic is built into the structure of the product even now. Look at the frozen meal closely and you can see how carefully the system has been designed around elimination. The vegetables have already been blanched and frozen. The meat has already been cooked, portioned, and sauced. The potatoes have already been mashed and shaped. The dessert has already been baked and cut. Even the tray compartments are engineered to separate moisture, preserve appearance, and guide reheating. The consumer is asked to do almost nothing beyond peel, heat, and eat. That is not an accidental feature, it is the whole point. From an industrial perspective, this is impressive. 4 distinct foods, each with different moisture levels, reheating behaviors, and textural vulnerabilities, are produced separately and then synchronized into one tray. The turkey must remain recognizable as meat after freezing and reheating. The gravy must coat rather than flood. The potatoes must stay smooth. The vegetables must not turn to mush. The dessert must survive months in storage and still feel like dessert rather than residue. To make that happen, the system depends on exact portioning, freezing speed materials, science compartment geometry, and in microwave-era meals, hidden heat management tools such as susceptors. That last detail captures the ingenuity of the category perfectly. Consumers often assume the microwave is doing all the work. In reality, the packaging has been engineered to compensate for the microwave's weaknesses. Metallic films help crisp surfaces that the microwave alone cannot brown properly. Tray shapes influence how heat is distributed. Materials are selected not simply to hold food, but to act as part of the cooking process. What looks like a cheap plastic tray is actually a carefully designed thermal system. And yet, despite all this complexity, the final user experience is meant to feel effortless. That may be the frozen meal's most important achievement. It hides infrastructure. It compresses agriculture, food processing, cold storage packaging, science distribution, branding, and domestic habit into a 5-minute ritual so smooth that the consumer barely notices any of it. That invisibility is part of why William Maxon vanished so easily from the popular story. The most influential products are often the ones that become so normal people stop asking where they came from. Maxon's contribution was foundational, but he lacked the giant cultural machine that later turned the idea into a household icon. Swanson had marketing scale, timing, and a perfect name. So the product was remembered, but the original inventor largely was not. That pattern repeats across industrial history. The first person to build something is not always the one history remembers. Often the remembered name belongs to the company or promoter who attached the invention to a broader social desire. In this case, the desire was not just for food. It was for speed, ease, modernity, and relief from labor. The frozen meal embodied all of that. Over time, the category expanded far beyond the original turkey and sides template. It absorbed every dietary trend and every marketing niche. It became calorie-conscious, indulgent, organic, plant-based, protein-heavy, global, child-friendly, upscale, budget, and gourmet. But the core logic never changed. No matter the cuisine or brand, the frozen meal still promises the same thing: food, with almost nothing required of the person eating it. That promise explains why the category became global. Once the manufacturing system existed, it could be adapted endlessly. Japanese bento-style frozen trays, Indian thali, Mexican enchilada platters, diet meals, comfort meals, and premium frozen entrees are all variations on Maxon's original insight. Different flavors, same principle. Separate foods converging in one tray, preserved by freezing, waiting to become dinner with minimal effort. And that is why the story matters. It is not just about who invented a product or how a tray is filled. It is about how a technological solution enters culture and begins changing behavior far beyond its original purpose. A man freezes cauliflower, discovers that quality can survive cold, and builds a meal around that insight. Another man sees a warm airline meal and realizes it can be sold to a television generation. An industry grows. A household ritual shifts. A dinner table becomes quieter. Skyplate, Stratomeal, TV dinner. 3 names for one underlying idea feeds someone without asking much from them at all. 80 years later, that idea is still working exactly as intended. A person opens a freezer, peels back a film, waits a few minutes, and dinner appears. Behind that moment stand farms, factories, ovens, blast freezers, trucks, packaging engineers, food scientists, and decades of cultural change. Yet the user experiences only convenience. That is the brilliance of the frozen meal, and perhaps also its cost. It solved the problem of dinner so well that it quietly changed what dinner was. Once you see that the tray stops looking simple, it becomes a condensed piece of industrial and social history, one that fed millions, reshaped routines, and left the original inventor almost invisible inside his own idea.